Raymore, Missouri, a name you probably wouldn't know unless you lived within 30 miles of it. It doesn't have a famous annual festival, no diners featured on national TV, no championship-winning sports teams. Raymore is like a short breath in America's long symphony, enough to exist, but not enough to echo. On autumn afternoons, when the sun slants across the tin rooftops, you can walk from one end of town to the other in 15 minutes, including time to stop at Joan's Place for a coffee and to ask Mrs. June about the orange cat she insists is her late husband reincarnated. Here, everyone knows everyone, so much so that names are optional. A nod at the gas station is enough to say, "I saw your porch light still on at AM, but there's one more thing everybody knows, though rarely spoken aloud. No one goes near the old tracks after midnight. There's a stretch of railway running west of town. Today, it's buried beneath tall grass, the iron rails rusting away, exposed only in patches like the ribs of some fossilized beast slumbering beneath the earth. The elders call it the Old Starlight Line, once Raymore's pride and joy. A night train that ran from Chicago to the south, gliding past wheat fields and sleepy towns, like a streak of silver across the sky. Back in the 1920s, Raymore had a tiny train depot, just a wooden shack with a hand-painted sign, but every evening, its golden lamps lit up the whole town. People would gather along the tracks just to watch the silver cars roll by, like mechanical dreams. It was an age when America still believed in the future, and trains carried that belief in their steel bones. Then came war. Then came the Great Depression. People left town and never came back. The Starlight Line ceased operations in 1939. The depot was torn down. Raymore returned to its stillness, but as with every place touched by time, it never truly rests. Some of the old-timers, like Mr. Delmer, the former rail signal operator, still say, when a train runs too long, it leaves an aftershock, not on the ground, but in the air. In dreams, on the night of November 10, 1954, Artha Gillis, 32, working a night shift at the gas station off Route 58, called the police. Her voice trembled like it was caught in the wind. "I heard a train," she said. "Not a normal one. The sound, it rumbled like thunder, but stretched out like someone rewinding time. Then I saw it. A pitch-black train. No headlight. No passengers. Not a single soul. When the police arrived, there were no signs." That section of rail had been inactive for nearly 15 years. But Martha insisted. She saw the wheels spinning through the darkness, trailing a melody that sounded like an old record, music from another century. And at the last car, there stood a woman in a long dress, silently waving. The report said simply, "Unverified." No physical evidence. Possibly sleep-deprived or hallucinating. But from then on, the rumors began. They said if you stood by the track at exactly 2:17 a.m. on November 11, you'd hear the steel wheels roll by. And if you dared to look, you'd see the black train. That train, it's unlike anything that ever existed. No one knows where it comes from. No map charts its course. And strangest of all, it always appears on abandoned tracks, as if it doesn't need steel to run, only memory. A boy named Polly Benson in 1964 once told his father, "Dad, I saw a train. It didn't make a sound, but my watch stopped. I stood there for so long, but it was still night. When it vanished and I checked again, it was morning." His father didn't believe him until he opened his pocket watch and saw it too had stopped. At exactly 2:17 a.m. in the 1970s, local radio station KMOX began logging strange signal disruptions every November 11th. They heard old-fashioned music, waltzes and string instruments, and sometimes the long wail of a train whistle. Though no trains ran within 60 miles, a technician named Dan Riker recorded a tape in 1977, capturing a woman's voice in a vintage cadence. "We are still traveling, through nights and through your dreams. Don't look back. No one wants to be remembered too long." The tape was archived for years, until the station went digital. Now, all that remains is static, as if time itself refused to preserve it. Then, in 1987, Joel Mathers, 19 years old, did what no one had dared before. he tried to board the train. His story began with the final year physics project. Joel was fascinated by the black train phenomenon. He interviewed townsfolk, mapped the old rail line, even set up automated recording equipment. On the night of November 10, he stood by the overgrown track, notebook and camera in hand. No one knows what happened, but the next morning, police found his shoes neatly placed by the rails and his journal. The final page read in his handwriting, "They are not dead, just in transit." Joel was never seen again. No phone signal, no footage. The police ruled it a disappearance. But Joel's mother Marlene still believes her son is out there. Not dead, just still in motion, the train itself. Today, each year, people still gather at the old tracks. Not out of curiosity, but remembrance. Remembering someone who's gone. Remembering a time that's lost. Remembering a feeling that has no name, as if something never quite stopped. And on windy nights, when all of Raymore falls into silence, some say you can still hear the steel wheels turning steady. Not fast, not slow, but like an ancient heartbeat. Sometimes there's violin music from nowhere, as if a vanished orchestra still plays among the tall grass. A paper boy named Billy in 2002 claimed he saw a red light sweep past his backyard, and for a moment, the world froze. "I saw a woman in the last car," Billy said. "She looked at me, not angry, just sad." The sound of wheels on rails, music from another century, and a woman waving in silence. Mr. Delmer, who operated train signals for 3 decades before Raymore Station shut down, still sits on his porch every night, staring toward the old tracks. Whenever someone asks about the midnight whistle, he simply shakes his head slowly and says, "That train doesn't come to take anyone away. It comes to remind us. Some things never stop no matter how much we forget them." There are autumn nights, when the fog hangs low and every light in town has gone out, that certain people simply cannot sleep. They don't know why, only that something seems to be calling them to the door. They stand on their porches, arms wrapped around their coats, eyes fixed on the dark western horizon where old, buried train tracks lie forgotten beneath the weight of time. Some say they don't actually see anything, just a sensation, as if the ground vibrates faintly beneath their feet, like something massive is moving just under the grass. A faint echo, like iron wheels sliding across wooden rails, but deeper, older, not of this era. And every year, without fail, on November 11th, at exactly 2:17 a.m., that train appears again. It has no name, no lights, no engine, no sound until it's already upon you. And just as someone reaches out to touch it, it fades into the fog as if it was never there. The first recorded case of this recurrence came in 1964. A boy named Polly told the story. Then a postman in 1974. A woman stranded in her car one night. In 1981, a veterinarian, a truck driver. None of them knew each other. None were aware of past accounts. Yet they all described the same thing. They saw the train. A local radio station began to take notice. They started keeping records: time, weather, temperature. Every detail matched with eerie precision. Each time the train appeared, radio waves distorted, clock stopped, phone batteries drained for no reason. Tape recorders would switch on by themselves, though no one touched them. One night in 1985, a group of college students tried to film the phenomenon with a VHS camera. When they played the tape back, the footage was nothing but a long streak of white, like the camera had captured light from a place where no light existed. And on the audio track, the sound of a violin played. Broken notes, disjointed phrases, haunting and mournful like weeping. One of the students, her name was Annie, vanished afterward. The only trace left behind was her scarf, caught on the fence near the old tracks, fluttering in the night wind. Edward Haynes lived in a small wooden house on the northern outskirts of Raymore, where the asphalt road ended and gave way to red dust and the wild calls of birds. He was a tall, thin man with a white beard that framed a weathered face, and eyes that always seemed fixed on the past, as if the future held nothing more for him. Inside his home, everything smelled faintly of old metal. Hundreds of model steam locomotives lined wooden shelves, rivets, hand cranks, Railway maps from a bygone century were framed under glass and hung on the walls like sacred relics. He had once been a steam train engineer for Union Pacific, until he retired in 1989. Since then, he had dedicated his life to studying, collecting, and restoring the things that once powered the pulse of this country: steam, steel, and motion.so. When Edward heard rumors about the Black Train, he didn't dismiss it as a joke. The first time he came across a written account of the strange phenomenon was in an old newspaper from the 1960s, which he had stumbled upon in a used bookstore in St. Louis. The article, written by a local journalist, told of a young boy who saw an unmanned train pass through abandoned tracks. At the time, Edward simply noted it down in one of his many notebooks. But then the clues began to multiply. Articles, audio recordings, personal diaries all shared one disturbing detail. The train always appeared on the same day each year, November 11, and always at exactly 73 minutes past midnight. Edward started compiling a log. He redrew historical railway maps from 1920 to the present, comparing them against witness reports. He installed magnetic field sensors at 5 different points around Raymore. The first year, nothing happened. But in the second year, at exactly 1:13 a.m. on November 11th, all 5 sensors spiked simultaneously. There was no phone signal. Every mechanical clock in Edward's house froze at 2:17. When he reviewed his security footage, all he saw was a thin line of mist drifting across the screen. But the thing that truly chilled him was an 11-second audio recording. The distant, mournful sound of a train whistle, echoing up as if from beneath the earth. After that, he stayed up every November 11th. Once, he swore he saw a red light in the distance, not the glow of a street lamp or a passing car. It moved sideways, slowly, and it seemed to be searching. Edward began to document everything into a single journal, Chronicle of the Unstopping. He sent copies to research institutes, geology departments, even paranormal study groups. The responses were always the same: unverified, inconclusive, or worse, no response at all. In 2001, he tried one last time. He stood at the rail crossing on Highway 58, armed with a camera, a tape recorder, and a piece of white cloth tied to a stake, hoping that even if he couldn't capture a picture, the wind from the train might move the fabric. At 2:17 a.m., the sky turned pitch black. Clouds gathered like a heavy curtain. Then the wind rose. The white cloth didn't flutter, it twisted, pulled as if by an invisible force. The camera shuddered briefly, then shut off. The recorder emitted a single sound, a deep male voice, whispered so close it seemed right beside his ear: Edward. Just one word. But it dropped him to his knees. The next morning, he couldn't remember how he'd made it home. He only knew he had cried, and the white cloth was gone. After that, he never tried again. But every year, he still stood at his window, pocket watch in hand, and at exactly 2:17, the hands would stop. Joel Mathers was born in 1968 and grew up in a red brick colonial house on the south side of Raymore. He was a quiet soul, fascinated by astronomy and abstract concepts. While other kids played baseball or built forts in the woods, Joel would sit for hours on the porch, eyes fixed on the starry sky, a small tape recorder in his hand. Everything is frequency, he once wrote in his journal. If I can just find the right one, I'll hear what everyone else is missing. In 1987, as a freshman physics student, Joel began researching the phenomenon of the Black Train after hearing a strange story from his grandmother, who had once worked at the Raymore post office. She told him that one night in 1954, she saw a red light sweep across her backyard and heard music drifting from the direction of the abandoned tracks. At first, she thought it was a dream, but days later, the wall clock at the post office stopped inexplicably, never to work again. Joel recorded every detail she said, and then began collecting more data. He dug through dozens of old newspaper articles, interviewed town residents, and photographed maps of long-defunct rail lines. After a year, he had assembled the most comprehensive file on the phenomenon anyone had ever compiled. He built his own magnetic field detector, set up reel-to-reel audio recorders, and carried a Super 8 film camera. That November, Joel made a decision. He would wait for the train, and if he could, he would board it. On the night of November 10, 1987, Joel left his house around p.m. He carried with him only a camera, a notebook, a red flashlight, and a thick book with a hand-labeled cover. If I don't come back. He stopped at the same crossing where Edward Haynes had once placed a white cloth. The wind had picked up. The grass swayed like ancient waves. At 1:13 a.m., Joel's wristwatch began to flicker. The sky fell eerily silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. And then, it arrived. No sound, no light, no whistle. But Joel knew it was there, not by sight, by his spine. Everything around him trembled, not like an earthquake, but like someone plucking the taut strings of time itself. He raised his camera. On, off, on again. No image. He tried the recorder. White noise. But buried within it, he heard voices. Like an old song. Like a prayer being chanted. Like a baby crying, strangled. All twisted into one discordant chord that chilled Joel to the bone. He stepped forward. His hand passed through the air, but it wasn't air. It was dense, like shaped fog. Before him, a train car began to emerge from the void. Rusted steel, the black paint slick like it was dipped in oil. No doors, no windows, only a single step. He took a deep breath and climbed aboard. Joel never came back. The next morning, police found his shoes placed neatly in the grass by the roadside. His camera was burned out. His notebook lay open, damp with dew. The last sentence, written in now smudged black ink, read, "They are not dead, just in transit." Joel's mother, Mrs. Marlene, later said that at exactly 2:17 a.m. that night, she woke up without knowing why. She heard a train whistle, but when she ran to the porch, there was only darkness. Nothing but the wind and the faint smell of scorched metal. The search lasted for months. No leads, no sightings, no witnesses, no video footage, but there was one detail the police never released to the public. The highway camera nearest the site had glitched at exactly 2:17 a.m., and in the only 2 frames it managed to capture before failing, there was a faint black streak like the silhouette of a train vanishing into the night. Not everyone believes the black train is a ghost or a hallucination. For some, it's evidence of something greater, something the modern world has yet to understand. The theories surrounding it are as diverse as the people who tell its stories. From science to theology to quiet skepticism. Dr. Lena Caldwell, a theoretical physicist at the University of Kansas, once published a controversial paper titled The Transit Loop: Time as Intersection, Not Flow. In it, she proposed the idea of an ancient temporal corridor, regions where the fabric of space bends naturally. According to her, the black train isn't a ghostly illusion, but a real locomotive trapped in a closed time loop, repeating the same moment, endlessly. She once visited Raymore and stood by the abandoned tracks with a low-frequency wave detector. The results she recorded showed an undefined pattern of vibrations unlike any known physical phenomena. "It's not the sound of something moving," she explained. "It's the sound of time itself being stretched." Meanwhile, Pastor Ezekiel Ford, who once lived near a mountain range in Arkansas, believes the train is a pilgrimage for lost souls. "God does not abandon anyone," he said, "but there are those mankind has forgotten. That train is the final place for those who no longer exist in memory." He believes that every soul on board is an untold story. And the woman seen at the last car, a figure mentioned in many sightings, is a keeper of memories. In a special sermon held in a small church in Raymore, he once said to his congregation, "Do not call it evil. Think of it as a place where forgetting is reversed, a train that leads us not forward, but back to what we once lost." Another theory, stranger still, comes from a group called the Loop Seekers, who believe that there are parallel timelines subtly overlapping our own. They claim the black train is a crack between 2 realities. Those who vanish are not dead, they've simply crossed into the other lane of the same world. One member of the group, Claire Donovan, once posted a journal entry to a forum. "I stood on the tracks at 2:16. I heard singing, but when I looked around, the town was different. No streetlights, no gas station, Just wooden houses and a woman in a long dress, staring at me from the last car. The audio recording Claire claimed to capture, if it was real, lasted only 14 seconds, but in it, everyone could hear a faint woman's voice whisper, "You've returned at the wrong time." Of course, there are also non-believers. They dismiss it all as mass suggestion, a self-propagating legend born from the need to be remembered. But even they at times have heard a distant whistle in the November winds, echoing over old Earth, and in their eyes, though they deny it with words, there is a quiet acknowledgement in their silence. In 2007, 4 university students from Kansas City set out on a ghost train hunt as part of an independent documentary project. They brought with them a video camera, audio recording gear, GPS, backup batteries, and a laptop for live streaming. The goal? To capture footage of the black train, or at least record something strange on the night of November 11. The group consisted of 3 men and 1 woman, Brandon the director, Lynn the cinematographer, Curtis the sound tech, and Jordan the narrator. They set up camp near an old stretch of track on the eastern edge of Raymore, right beside the tall grassy area where Joel Mathers had once vanished. Their livestream began at 11:00 p.m. Nothing unusual at first, just wind, chirping crickets, and the occasional bug flickering across the lens. But at exactly 1:50 am, the signal began to flicker. Flashlights dimmed despite fresh batteries. GPS showed their location as off-grid, as if their coordinates no longer existed within the known system. Curtis was the first to hear something. A faint metallic sweep carried on the wind. Brandon turned the camera toward the sound but saw only grass. Then, the camera jolted ever so slightly. No one had touched it. The trees around them began to lean in one direction, as if the wind now moved with intention. A train whistle echoed, distant but clear. Each of them reacted differently. Lynn burst into tears. Curtis stepped back, and Jordan just stood there. In the frame, his eyes shimmered with something that was both terror and awe. At 2:17 am, the livestream cut out completely. The screen went black. What followed was a 9-minute video clip, origin unknown, showing only one shot. The 4 of them standing beside the tracks, but not moving. No wind, no sound, no motion, as if time itself had frozen. By morning, search teams were dispatched. They found the camp, the equipment, and the laptop still running, but only one person remained. Jordan. He was sitting on the tracks, eyes wide open, hugging his knees, silent. He wasn't injured, but he wouldn't speak. He wouldn't eat. He didn't sleep for 3 days. In Brandon's notebook, left behind, there was a hastily scribbled note in pencil. "We shouldn't be here. They're still moving, but we're not." Then something even stranger happened. Every year, on November 11, that 9-minute video would mysteriously reappear on an anonymous forum, even though all original files had supposedly been deleted. Each time it resurfaced, one detail had changed. First, the color of Lynn's dress. Then, Curtis's position. Then, the way Jordan looked at the camera. Finally, in 2018, the video's ending changed. In a close-up shot, a dark silhouette appeared at the far end of the train. A woman wearing a long dress, holding a red lantern. She waved. No one knows how the video still exists, and no one has seen Jordan since. He vanished from the city, from social media, and from the lives of those who knew him. All that remains is one final audio clip, his voice, whispering in the dark, "It's not where the train goes. It's where it doesn't leave." On a slow autumn afternoon in Raymore, where red leaves blanket the cracked sidewalks and old houses still bear the faded paint of half a century ago, a boy named Theo, the grandson of Edward Haynes, stood silently beside the rusted railroad tracks. In his hand, he held his grandfather's pocket watch. The hands had stopped many years ago, frozen at a precise moment, 2:17 am. The boy didn't fully understand what had happened. He only knew that every year, on November 11th, his grandfather would sit in the wooden rocking chair, staring out the window, silent as if waiting for something. And this year, his grandfather was gone. But the boy remained driven by something deep in his bones that told him the train had never truly stopped. A cold gust of wind swept through, carrying the metallic echo of steel and the scent of oil and grease. The boy looked up. Nothing, but he knew somewhere, just beyond sight and reason, the train was still moving. No one knew where it was going. No one knew when it would stop, if it would stop, and perhaps the most frightening thing wasn't the train that takes you away, but the one that brings memories back. The things we tried to forget, tried to bury, tried to pretend never happened. They were returning quietly, on the thunderous wheels of time. An old man once said, that train doesn't come to take anyone away. It comes to remind us that some things never stop even when we've forgotten them. And when night falls over Raymore, deep in the wind, if you listen long enough you might hear the train's whistle, echoing from a place no longer marked on any map.